Hey everyone, Pastor Adam and
Pastor Bob, good to be with you here today.
yeah, good to be with you. This is Unafraid number 4. We'll see what you have in store for us today. You ready?
I am. Ooh, apocalypse.
Yay. Wow.
Well, we're glad to be back with you again today for this conversation as we continue to talk about being afraid and how we can live unafraid with courage and hope in very uncertain times. So as we're thinking about that, today in this session, we're going to talk about apocalyptic thinking. So the idea that the world is coming to an end, and there's a sort of Christian version of that, and then there's the version we entertain ourselves with blockbuster summer hits. And then there's the version that we look at in the world around us and just think everything's going to hell. And how are we going to survive this? And then we're going to talk about the fear of change. And this is a very real fear that we experience in our lives. We'll talk about the fear of missing out, or we might get to that. And we'll talk about some of our financial fears. And so that's where we're heading in this session. And I want to just jump in. And I want to begin by mentioning something I mentioned over and over again in the book. There's an acronym we talked about for fear that has to do with the things that aren't real. But then one of the approaches that I try to mention again and again in the book for dealing with fear is fear is facing your fears with faith. And that faith is not just our faith in God, but it's choosing what assumptions we believe, right? I think about in Hebrews 11:1, it says this, a very famous passage most people have memorized, but in the Common English Bible, faith is the reality of what we hope for, the proof of what we don't see. And so we're believing in things that we don't see, and we can either believe in things we don't see in a positive way, or we can believe the worst possible assumptions about things and find ourselves deeply depressed or really, really afraid. So face your fears with faith, examine your assumption in the light of the facts, attack your anxieties with action. And so often if we just rest in our fear and we don't do anything about it, we find it just continues to, it ruminates. We ruminate with it, and then releasing your cares to God. And so I want that to be sort of the backdrop as we talk about these fears. And when we think about apocalypse, I came to faith in Christ in a tradition where we heard almost every Sunday about the second coming of Christ, or the Antichrist was already here and present and alive. Did either of you grow up in settings where that was emphasized a lot?
Yes, it's constantly the apocalyptic rhetoric and just language is very present in the community, and I even see it in my community, in the congregation that I serve today, that they are every time that there is an occurrence like we experienced with the eclipse, I would see just people that were worried because there's something that is out of the norm, and it will bring up a lot of that language about this is the end of times. This is something that is coming up, and I feel like it just puts people on over the edge of the unknown, and it's just difficult time to pastor someone who is in that state of mind.
Right. It's interesting, all those promises in the Bible about the second coming of Christ were meant to instill hope. Of course, they were meant to tell you to be prepared anytime, for the moment when you might die or you would meet Christ face to face, that the Lord is coming back. But they were always meant to instill hope, but instead, so often today, they're instruments of fear.
All right, can we pause? Well, of course we can pause, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right on. I mean, the whole idea of apocalypse is not a terrifying thing, at least in Christian doctrine and understanding. And if you actually, of course, read the book of Revelation and some parts in Daniel and other things, it's not about Christians being afraid of things that should be coming down in the future. And even if it is awful, like COVID-19 pandemic, people dying, that's really not the last word about who we are. So Christians don't have to be fearful of, what did he say? An eclipse? I mean, like,
well, yeah, I thought the eclipse was freaking awesome.
Yeah. I was like, no, it's not the end
excited about it.
Yeah. So I think for me, what's interesting, well, two things. So maybe you can talk about this too, but why do some Christians seem to enjoy feeding on apocalyptic fear? Like there's some
Right.
well-known writers, there are pastors, there are a whole maybe church groups that just like love talking about the end of times and how scary it's going to be, and how, like, what's that about? And because it's not really I didn't grow up with that. Maybe you didn't grow up with that, but
Right.
yeah, I don't
No.
get it. Yeah. And the second thing,
I don't either. No, go.
yeah, the second thing, of course, is like the Greek word, right? Apocalypse doesn't mean end of days. It means revelation, like uncovering something, seeing what's really going on. And that's really what
Right.
the book of Revelation is ultimately about, is showing us a truer reality. And it's supposed to fill us with hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the problem with Revelation, the book itself, and I don't, is that the imagery is so, it's pretty, I mean, it's kind of shocking, right?
Mhm.
It and kind of stark at times. And I think some people go to that, and that's sort of, I mean, it's so funny because man, anytime a reading from the book of Revelation comes up in the lectionary, I'm like, I'm out. I'm not using that. Which is a problem that I have, apocalyptic literature, anywhere it is, it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Because it's shrouded in, well, a lot of like the book of Revelation is so shrouded in secrecy, because he's writing, John of Patmos is writing in secrecy.
Right.
And some of the stuff we don't know what the code words were, in a way, maybe.
Right.
Which makes it a little scarier too, I think.
Yeah.
Because there is this sort of like, I'm not real sure what's going on here. I had a friend, Adam, who grew up in a church that talked a lot about the end times and the second coming, and he told me a story that was both sad and funny.
Yeah.
He came home from school, and his mom had been mopping the kitchen floor, and so the mop was sitting out, and the wash machine was going, and like his sister's backpack was there on the kitchen table when he got home.
Yeah.
And he was pretty sure that the rapture had happened.
Oh. Right.
And this like fifth grade boy thought he had been left behind.
Nice. Yes.
And his whole family had been taken.
Poor kid.
He told me that story, and I laughed so hard.
Right. But he was probably genuinely terrified. Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
He was. He laughed too. I mean, thankfully.
Right.
But he said, yeah, when I was in fifth grade, I was terrified. And I don't understand that, because Christianity is I mean, here we are sitting in Easter, right? And how you turn Easter and the hope of resurrection into something to terrify is sort of what boggles my mind. This idea that God loves us so much that God's willing to overturn like death in a way, maybe that we don't get or understand, but we take that overturning and that love and we turn it into something so fearful, and it becomes God, in a sense, almost damning us, or the fear of that happening, that I don't know. That story doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never really gone there.
What's also interesting in many of these apocalyptic kind of stories or theologies that maybe people have grown up with is, it usually is, if you believe what we tell you, then you will be freed from the pain or the tribulation or the trials to come. And that just isn't even Christianity either. I mean, if God was willing to send God's own son to go through pain and torture and be part of us, then certainly God's going to send Christians into places that are, trials, of course, right? I mean, and being free from or escaping pain and discomfort in this life has never been part of Christianity. It's kind of people just selling you on something.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Ready to keep going?
I am.
I want to move beyond that to the fear of change. we were having a conversation in my small group, all the folks are my age or older, about how, gosh, we're afraid of our grandchildren being born into this world. And I wonder if our grandparents were afraid of us being born into this world. And you think about the change that happened with technology. Ginger, what do you think about the fear of change?
To go with your point on, as a parent of children entering middle school, we moms get together and we talk about, so what is social media doing to our children? And, it's the Elvis of today, maybe, of like, this is going to ruin them. This is going to take them down. This is, everything they do is documented. And then
She just said the Elvis of the day. Oh my gosh, right? I mean, and that's so true. I don't want to dwell on this, but like, people were afraid that Elvis was corrupting their kids, right? And now it's just like, Elvis is so benign that, yeah.
Well, it's like there's an 80s kind of alternative station on satellite radio that I listen to because it makes me feel young again.
Yeah.
And what's so funny is I was listening, there was like a punk band, the Ramones came on.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And again, the Ramones were like this, but you listen to them and I'm like, this is fun music. People were up in arms about the Ramones and what they were doing.
Right. Yeah.
So weird.
Well, I wasn't allowed to watch Michael Jackson, for example, when I was growing up because he was a bad influence.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying Michael Jackson was perfect in any way, shape, or form. It clearly wasn't. But his music, it was just pretty good. So, yeah. All right.
He's not the king of pop for nothing.
Against them, and so it's hard to be a parent, not just changing things in chapters of life, watching your children, but seeing the things that can go wrong and the factors out of our control, and what it means to be a normal kid today. Looks like there's a lot of threats, and so I think that that's really where faith comes in. Of God protect them, God help them make good decisions, help me mother, help me know what to say and what to do, and when to intervene and when not to intervene. But yeah, I live in fear of change for my kids.
One of the things with change that I see is within the congregation, there's 4 generations worshiping together. And so, and each generation has their own experience with technology. So how do we merge those different aspects so that we have a meaningful worship for everyone?
That is key. So I think part of what you mentioned is this fear of change, Carlos, leaves us unsettled inside. And sometimes when we're unsettled, then our response to it is to react and to look at whatever the changes are and to just totally reject them out of hand. And I remember speaking with a man who was in his 70s when the internet was really coming on board. And he was really upset about the idea that, you would have an email address and people could find you on the internet. And he said, I'm not going to have a computer. I am not going to have anything to do with this technology. And that was a reaction that we often have to that kind of change. So that kind of fear of change, coupled with the fear of the other, often leads us, even as people of faith, to turn away from things that God is calling us to do because of our fears. It seems like that's a common occurrence. I want to talk about and wrap it up with the fear of finance.
Yeah.
And
all right, we'll come back to that in just a second. But fear of change, right? Technology is a great example of this because there's new tech like every day, or new every week.
Right.
And we can either fight it, we can ignore it, or we can, what's the other option? Fight, freeze, flight, run away from it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what we see all the time in the midst of change is people are actually afraid. Change does bring about fear. That's a normal human response. But most people aren't able to name that, like they were just talking about there. They can't say, they don't say, I'm afraid of the computer. They say, I don't like computers. I hate computers. All computers should die. That's how we...
Well, and they're ruining society.
Yeah, right. They're ruining society, or they're corrupting our kids' minds, or know, and some of that is true. We have to be good stewards of the screen time. I get all that, but with all of our fears, you can check yourself, right? When you start having this kind of language, that's like, I just hate that, or I won't even talk about that, or I'm that's usually a fear that you have not yet named and addressed.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm just thinking about
all your fears.
Well, all my fears, but all of the fears that people have right now about, you know, about what's going on. But what I'm hearing more, or what I maybe are the fears of what's to come, right? So, you know, we have people protesting social distancing right now because I think there's a fear of what's to come and when it's going to end. So part of that is the fear of this unknown. But then I hear people talking about, well, when things get back to normal, and um and I when I hear that, what I hear is this fear. Those are fear words, because when things get back to normal, is not going to look like what we remember, you know.
Right.
It's just not, it's not going to look like what we remember, you know. And that's something
not
we
change. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want anything to change. You just want everything to come back to the way it was, which is just not going to happen. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you know, you consider how many people have contracted this just in the United States alone. How many people have died? And it's like, no, it's things have changed drastically for us and our kids. So how are we going to deal with that, with those with those changes? Because, and also we can't know what those changes are going to be or how they're going to look, or, you know, yeah, we've got a lot to, I mean, this is different than like the internet, you know, or, you know, the technology that comes along, because, well, it just is. I can't explain how.
You can't, because with tech, for example, and the internet, you can say no to it, but
Right.
you can't say no to, I mean, I guess you could be denied COVID if like it doesn't exist or something like that. But for most of us, this is a reality, and we're all in it.
Yes.
We all have to face it, and it's been placed upon us rather than chosen by us. Like, nobody would choose pandemic virus. I mean, please sign me up for that. No, you know, it's just like, no, but so we're just all being forced to deal with it at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
yes.
All right. What's next? Finances? Woohoo!
Yeah.
Let's hit all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want a panic attack today.
You experienced, or have you ever experienced an insecurity about finances, a concern about finances, fear of finances? What does that look like?
Tied to my calling, actually. So I felt a calling to go to seminary. I wasn't sure what God would have me do with it, but I felt like I needed to make that change and explore it. You know, I was never going to reach the earnings that I had in the business world. But I remember journaling about it one night and praying. And the way that my lines of journaling worked out, I had the word scared, and then I think this is sacred work, and the scared and the sacred lined up. And if you flip the letters, scared and sacred are just the C and the A reverse. And I felt like looking at that journal page, I was like, this is sacred work, and I'm scared, but maybe my scared is an indication that it's sacred and that I'm supposed to do that. And that journal page really became a moment of, I felt God speaking to me of, you know, just flip the way you're looking at this, and you're going to be okay. We wake up in the morning saying, if I'm so successful, why am I so unhappy? You know? And that's how I felt in my business career. Now I feel like I have a sense of meaning. I don't have as much money, but I wake up excited about what God will do with me today.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great conversation we've had today. And I'm anxious for the folks who are watching this to have your own conversation today about these things. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Yeah.
I have with me today.
So Adam, sorry, they didn't talk about finances.
They didn't talk much about finances at all.
They're so afraid of finances that they didn't even want to talk about it. And I get it, because I'm not a big fan either. But
right.
I think that's the big fear. You know, like as we're moving forward and we're talking about how things are going to change, that's, I think, that's
the fear right now for many people is like, for some beyond getting COVID, they would rather, they're afraid of their financial futures.
Right. And you know, I mean, churches are too. I mean, I think of some of the some smaller churches that, were already struggling and on the verge of closing. There's got to be a lot of fear around their life and as a community. But then you get in. So that's, if you keep getting smaller, the fear, I feel, almost like grows, as you move from, like national concerns about debt into, but as you get to the family, that fear just gets exponentially bigger.
Right.
And I think of, and so, how do we as the church, how do we actually really help people through, I don't know, how do we help them through the reality? Because it's a real fear of, what am I going to do, that a lot of people are stuck with. And it's not like once the state of New York opens back up, the economy is, everything is just going to go back to the way it was. It's not like, once the economy, boom, all the restaurants are going to rehire all of their people, and boom, everything's going back to the way it was before. So, and I'm not trying to add to anybody's fear out there, so I'm sorry, but I'm questioning, like myself, what can we do realistically as a community and as churches and all of that. So
right.
Anyway.
I mean, well, and you said you don't want to add to anybody's fear, and I get that, but naming something out loud is actually what helps us deal with our fears. And so if I say, I'm afraid of the financial future for my family, and I say that to you, my friend and pastor friend, right? Then all of a sudden I can analyze that. But if I just hold it in, and if I just kind of like let it fester, then I'm not dealing with it. So one of the very first step is just like, let's name reality. I'm afraid of this, and that's okay. But then I think the next steps, at least with financial fears, is to take action. And then you say there's like faithful, FEAR was faithful, examine your circumstances, then take some action about your anxieties.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Yep.
I wasn't exactly totally listening, and I didn't write it down, but take some action. I mean, like, it's
right.
Once you've named it, then what's the next right thing to do? And maybe you don't have, your 5-year plan out there, but what's the next right thing to do? And this is true with our finances. This is also true with our emotions and the change that is coming. Yeah. We don't know exactly what the world's going to be like 6 months from now. What's the next right thing for me to do today? And even Jesus says this, don't worry about tomorrow. Just pay attention to what you have to do today. Because you don't know. None of us know what 6 months is going to look like.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've gotten pretty used to saying to people asking, well, what are we going to do? I've always been good at it, but I've gotten really good at saying, well, I'm not really sure.
Right.
I really don't know what's coming next, people are asking about what we're going to do about worship when they open things back up. And I'm like, I don't know, because I don't know what that's going to look like. So, we can make some contingencies about what we might do. But I don't know.
Yeah. And I guess that's another response to fear, is coming up with all these scenarios and then having some answers,
Right.
But that's more driven out of fear and anxiety than it is reality. Because as you said, the truth is, I don't know what it's going to look like. I really don't. So the more important thing for me is, what kind of person am I going to be in the midst of the I don't knows? And am I going to be freaked out by that, or am I going to be okay? I'm at peace as I wait for an answer. Right. Obviously, the answer is you should be at peace. It's okay if you don't know.
Right.
Okay, let's listen to the expert.
Today, Jerry Stead. He is a remarkable leader. He's been CEO of many companies, CEO of NCR, Legion Corporation, Ingram Micro, IHS, and now most recently IHS Markit, one of the leading information providers in the world. And I've had a chance to know Jerry for some time, and I've just appreciated and respected his leadership so much. And Jerry, today we're talking about about fear and the role that fear plays, in particular in the areas of finances, in the areas of leadership, in how fear changes the game when it comes to what's going on in our world around us. And I'd love to just ask you a few questions about this. I wonder, could you say a word about the role first that fear plays when it comes to the markets? Let's talk about that first.
Yeah, uncertainty creates fear, Adam. And a good example is when a company misses an estimate, that creates uncertainty, which creates great fear. I will say we're in a remarkable time right now, because in my view, in all the years I've led companies, there's more global uncertainty than I've ever seen, and yet the markets are I was going to say tending. They're not tending. They're actually ignoring a lot of it.
Interesting. So let's talk about as a CEO of a company and how fear. Where do you see fear at work among employees? How do you manage to fear?
Well, that's a great question. I believe the really great leaders over communicate. I try to all the time about change, because the thing that creates the most fear for any person, any team, or any organization, again, is uncertainty. So, for example, when we announced the merger of IHS Markit, very big deal, both teams with over 15,000 people around the world, I got deluged, as I expected, with questions. What's going to happen here? What's going to happen there? Three things. One, they knew me well because I've led the company for the last 17 years, and I've always been open, honest, candid, caring with my communication. Two, I get out and touch as many of the people as I can. This year I've traveled 405,000 miles around the world to be with our customers and our people so they can ask anything they want to ask. And that's so critical. And then three is you lay out goals, which we did. We announced, actually, in our case, the day of the merger, what we're going to do financially, how quickly we would make the changes that impacted our people, and what we would do with building new infrastructure. Then reported on that and still do weekly. Those are the three things I've always used. But it starts with trust. You know, I operate with 100% trust of all my people. I try to make sure I earn their trust, because when that happens, that reduces fear when you tell them what's going to happen, communicate what's going to happen, and then measure what's going to happen.
Let me ask you, Jerry, as CEO, you carry a lot of responsibility. Are there times that you've been afraid personally or as a leader, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's also an excellent question. I get up, as you may remember, Adam, pretty early, about 3 o'clock every day. The first thing I do is exercise. Second thing I do is meditate. One of the things I do every day is read, even though I haven't memorized upside down and backwards, is read actually Norman Vincent Peale saying, I believe, I believe, I believe. I believe that God will do his very best if I listen and learn. So I do that every day. So that gets me started because I have fears too, obviously. What I've learned over the years is that faith conquers fear 100% of the time.
Absolutely, that's great. So I want to end by mentioning something I include in the book, and that is your statement, which I've always appreciated, facts are our friends. Would you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, because I've used that a lot. As you can imagine, recently too, one of the new projects I've taken on is a business that is actually the leader in agriculture information in the world. I'm doing that as a give back to the world going forward after I retire here at the end of the year from IHS Markit. And when I got there, what they had been taught was give an answer, figure out later if it's right. And so I use facts as our friends on everything. Facts will give us what we need to do to be successful. Facts will help us think through what we need to do. And if we're fact-based on one side, then open, honest, candid, caring communication on the other, we'll succeed in everything. And I use that all the time, Adam.
That's excellent. One of the things that strikes me about you, Jerry, is that as I know you, it's never about how much money you can have and you can make, but instead you've looked at how do I use money to make a difference in the world. Would you say a little bit more about that?
As you know, we invest. We don't just give. We invest in things that we believe, Mary Joy and I believe, will make a huge difference to the world. And we've stayed very focused on that. As you may remember, we went through college on got married after our freshman year, went through college on $2,900 a year, lived great, by the way. But we said if we ever had a chance, we'd give everything away to make a difference to the world. And the joy of giving is the most wonderful thing there is. One example only, I started, as you may remember, 12 and a half years ago, the research center for Alzheimer's Research Institute in Phoenix. Today, we're running a $500 million study on two vaccines in the United States, the UK, and Canada that will change the world if we make it happen. And we were able to invest and make that happen. I also had the honor of speaking to the 5,500 top Alzheimer's researchers in the world, asking them to do me a favor and spend all their time and energy going forward on partnering with each other to get rid of this. And so that's been the kind of thing we always do. It's because we made a decision to invest.
That's terrific, Jerry. Jerry, thank you so much for joining me today and for being a part of this study. I really appreciate it. I admire you. I respect you. And I'm really grateful for the way that you have lived your life unafraid with courage and hope. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I don't know if you heard what I heard, but here's what I heard. I heard that Jerry faced his fears with faith. I heard that he examined the assumptions in the light of the facts. I heard that he was regularly attacking his anxieties with action, and that in the end, he released his fears to God. And that worked for Jerry, and I think it can work for you. Let's live as people who are unafraid with courage and hope.
Okay. Well, we got our FEAR again at the end.
What was it again?
I think okay, let's see. Face our fears with faith, right? That's F. Examine
the facts.
The facts. Take action about our anxieties and release everything to God. Yeah.
That's not bad, I suppose.
This is pretty good, as acronyms go. So
yeah.
I don't really know how that last part was exactly talking about financial anxieties and stuff. More, it was just kind of like, here's a guy who has dealt with high level fears and management and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I get that. And I mean, he's not wrong to say, and I did appreciate this, that if you are facing facts on, with your internal people, it's very easy then to be open and honest and compassionate when you go out into the world, because you've already not given into the lies that you're trying to promote something that you don't have, or but that's a whole other conversation than the fears of financial instability at this point. Yeah.
Right.
But I agree. I mean, if you're honest in the inner room, then you can be honest when you're out in the world. So.
Yeah. I think the thing is that when I hear that, I'm like, that's great. And I agree that we that facts are really important. There are times where I feel like we are in a post-facts era, or that the way I'm seeing the facts and the way that the other person is seeing the facts are completely different, and so the question in the midst of all of this stuff is, how do we bridge that? Like I read an article today about, because I got pretty upset with some of the people who were protesting the state shutdowns, right? And I realized one of the reasons why I was getting upset was because what I was being shown were people holding up signs saying, "I need a haircut," right? I don't know if you saw that, but
no, but yeah.
So there are people holding up signs at state capitol buildings, standing right next to other people with a sign that said, "I need a haircut." I'm like, you don't need a haircut that bad, right?
Right.
But I was reading an article today that was basically talking about the facts of people are losing their jobs, and we just talked about it, and they're really afraid, and that's part of what their protesting. That's what they're talking to. They don't feel like people are listening to them and what their needs are and what their fears are. And so, they're protesting that now. And I'm like, okay, I
that's a legitimate concern and
yeah.
fear, not
Yes.
I need a haircut. It's and
Right.
that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, because when you don't
Right.
name your fear on the inside, my legitimate fear is I am afraid of financial insecurity coming down the road. Right?
Right.
Fair enough. That's a real fear.
Right.
Whether my hair looks bad, which it doesn't, because
I can have Oliver come and cut your hair, baby.
Right, exactly. That's not a legitimate fear. That's just you're not able to express what's really going on inside of you. Yeah.
Right. But I think the thing is that the facts that the people who are saying that about their financial security and wanting wanting their state to open so that they can work again, those facts are real and true, right? The facts that scientists are putting out there, doctors, all of that, yeah, but if we open up at this time, it could lead to this. Those projections are in facts and in what. So how do you balance these competing concerns and facts? And I mean, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I think that what
Sorry, you froze for a second to me,
yeah.
and I was like, I thought maybe I went off the deep end there. And
Yeah, I'm
you're
like,
like, no, you're an idiot.
Pastor
That's
Bob.
the dumbest question I've ever heard.
Yeah, right.
Can't even you.
Well, I think that the ultimate, I mean, what we look for in people who have to make those decisions where competing facts are coming at is, are they being
Right.
Are they being the kind of people that are open and honest with, that we feel that they're being open and honest with us? And are they able, people who have to make those decisions, are they able to put aside their own ego, their own personal spin on things so that they can make the right decision? And I think when you said we live in a post-facts world, to me that means like, well, then if it's not about facts anymore, then all I have left is my reputation, my public face, saving face. Right. And if that's all I have, then of course I'm willing to deny facts. I'm willing to spin. I'm willing to let people die in order to save my reputation, if that's all that I have left. So, yeah, I mean, I know it's a cop-out to say I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. At the same time,
Right.
My job and your job as a pastor is to help people have that kind of integrity and character to face the facts and to be truthful and honest and real and open with people, even if it hurts their reputation.
Right. Well, and even to be honest, like I have to be honest with myself about, I know that I choose, I don't know if that's right. I know that I have a certain way of looking at the world. And so certain facts impact me more than others, right? And so I believe that the facts that I think are the most important are the ones that we should be following and are true, and so we also honest with ourselves about our own kind of where we're predisposed, while also pointing out the fact that, in some ways, what some people are doing or what maybe is happening is dangerous. Can we cut this all out?
No, I like the ramble. I like it a lot. I think people need to see facts. Pastor Bob sometimes rambles. Let's just be honest, right?
He has no idea what he's talking about, and words just come out.
I think you absolutely. We have to. There's a fact that the fact of the fact is, I can see one thing and read the exact same fact as you, and because of my personality, how I view the world, it could mean something totally different. Of course, absolutely. I mean, this happens all the time in the church, I mean, Pastor Bob even said it about my sermon last Sunday. He's like, well, that's not where I would have taken that, but I appreciated your point of view, right? And he was being,
Yep.
I mean, you were being serious. I took it as a compliment, right?
Yeah.
You weren't saying, no, you were totally wrong and you're completely insane. You were just saying, well, it's interesting. I just wouldn't have done it, you know?
Nope.
Right. So.
I never looked into your deep blue eyes, and now I get what you're saying.
Aren't they pretty?
They're lovely.
All right. Now we're just being crazy. So we probably should just end this, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We'll be back. There's one more Unafraid. There's Unafraid number 5 coming soon, next week. All right.
Yep. Hope it's helping. Later.